Hello everyone and welcome back to the Retro Recall. I hope you're doing awesome. Well, it's been a while since we've done a Dell related video, so here we are, specifically with a Dell Workstation. A Dell Precision 420 to be exact, from 1999. And considering the system is 26 years old, I think it's in pretty darn good shape. So we're going to go over the system, see what kind of components it has, look on the inside, see what the condition of the system is, find out if it even turns on, and go from there. Again, really excited to dig into this computer. We have lots to do. Let's get right to it. And welcome back. So before I continue to dig into the actual computer and go over it and lift it all around and everything, I finally went out and got a turntable, a Lazy Susan as it's called. And to be honest with you, it's a wonderful tool, except for the fact that this Dell Precision workstation is so large that it actually just completely goes over the whole thing. And with the way the legs are on this computer, it just drags and doesn't work very well. So note to self, get either a larger one or get something to put across so that when you do have systems like this, you can certainly make it easier to turn around. So you're going to witness me struggling with this system specifically because it is quite heavy. So along the front, we do have that wonderful beige color, and it's really in really good condition. I mean that. I mean, it's looked like this was literally stored in a server room somewhere and was, well, brought out and put to e-waste. Well, here we are. I ended up getting it. So this particular computer is a Dell Precision 420, as I mentioned, and this was a workstation. Workstations generally were aimed at the commercial market or the business market versus, say, residential market, right? And you wouldn't see this too often in a home, and if you did, I'm sure your power bill was kind of through the roof, or you had quite a bit of money to be able to purchase one of these systems, because back then they were quite expensive and quite expansive as well. And we'll talk about that in a little bit. See what I did there? Expansive. Okay, so going over the computer itself, we do have an integrated floppy disk drive, 3.5 inch, and is molded into the front bezel. We do have an optical drive, not sure exactly the speed of it. It looks like just to be a standard reading drive, not anything fancy like a CDRW or a DVD reader or anything like that. We're talking back in 1999. It's probably a 12 or a 24 or even a 32 speed regular CD-ROM drive. We have two more 5.25 inch bays here that are fully populated with their covers, which is nice. We have a reset button, HD LED, our Dell Precision 420 kind of case badge to tell us what it is. And of course, we have our power button, which looks like a built-in light as well, or integrated LED. We have looks like a bunch of fins here, but it looks like ventilation for the system itself. Down below in the bottom left, there's a little button you can press, and that it looks like a side panel release button. We're going to get into that a little later. Down the bottom right, we do have two additional case badges. We do have a design for Microsoft Windows 2000 Professional, Windows NT Workstation 4, and Windows 98. So keeping in mind that in this era of computing, you would have, again, for a residential user, generally would say designed for Windows 98. And sometimes I saw them say Windows 2000, but this particular system says both the Windows 2000 and Windows NT 4. So really putting it really into that sort of business market. Plus being a workstation, I'm guessing this has dual CPU. And if it does, Windows 98 wouldn't be able to take advantage of that. Windows 2000 and Windows NT could. And I've done videos on that already, so I won't dig into that too deeply. So then we also have Intel inside, Pentium 3. So always great to have a Pentium 3 based system on the bench. But again, talking about the design, talking about the condition, is looking really, really good. Now, as I mentioned, this computer is extremely heavy. I mean, for Dell, there's one thing about them, regardless of them coming into the market and flooding the market with a whole bunch of systems and eventually being known as the capacitor plague and all the hassles that we dealt with back in the day, These systems were built solid, and I'm telling you, they were just built for strength and reliability and longevity. I mean, here we are 26 years later, arguably being able to fire this up here shortly, hopefully, of course. So we do have the side panel. It looks to be in really good shape. There's a couple of surface scratches. These are actually can be really easily removed with some cleaner and things like that when it comes to the markings. But outside of that, it looks to be in really, really good shape. You can see the feet design, as I mentioned. There's a foot here and a foot here, and this gap in the middle. That's where the turntable kind of sat underneath. So it wasn't going to go too far, unfortunately. All right, so it looks like the star of the show in the back here. We have lots and lots of I/O. Let's go over it. So I really like this design specifically. I mean, these systems, again, being aimed for the business market, tended to have a lot more, well, I would say stronger components when it comes to the design and the heft and how they're built. I mean, this is just, it feels like solid steel, to be honest with you. And then we also had always additional ventilation options. We also had additional power supply options. We'll go over that in a little bit. But the nice thing here that this particular board or this particular system, I mean, not being a server, it's a workstation still, has integrated SCSI, external SCSI, which is just absolutely awesome if you're going to be hooking up, an external SCSI device of some sort, whether, say back in the day, it'd be a tape backup drive, for example, or external peripherals. It's just really nice to see that. We also have a parallel port, two COM ports, of course, being very popular back in the day. We had two PS2 ports, one for your keyboard and one for your mouse, nicely labeled with our color coding. We also have integrated audio, so our 3 audio ports, 2 USB ports, which is really nice to have in a system this age, being from 1999. We do have 4 indicator lights here. Now, to my understanding, Dell included these in their more high-end systems to basically give you kind of postcodes, right? So when the system is posting, if you had a memory error or an issue with the board or things like that, these indicator lights generally gave you an idea of what was going on. We have integrated Ethernet as well, which is nice. We do have a dual output VGA video card. I have no idea what this particular video card is, but it is nice to see it populated as well. So sometimes these systems were, before they go to e-waste or before they're gotten rid of, people will strip the components out of them, but it's nice to get them like this. So we do have our Dell branded covers, which are nice. Sometimes these are just, again, if people remove them or decided to change them over the years, we don't get the Dell branded ones. We would just have blank covers. And then of course we have an additional Ethernet card by the looks of things. And sometimes these workstations, they would run in tandem. So you'd bridge the network connections to be able to get additional speed, additional reliability, things like that. And that was quite common back in the day. So having those two as well, again, or just switching and using one, not knowing what their exact application was, it's hard to comment on that. So down here, it looks like we do have a power supply as well. And it looks like up here we could put an additional power supply. It is all blocked off, so until I open this, I don't know what's going on. But I mean, just the ability to have a dual power supply potentially. But I found these power supplies, or Dells in general, were very proprietary in this era, where, I mean, it looked like a standard power supply, but the pinouts were different, the connections were different and things like that. And you just don't want to mess with them when it comes to that without testing them. Okay, let's take a look at the other side. And again, just so heavy. All right, this side here looks fantastic as well. I mean, outside some dirt and scratches and things like that, not a big deal. We have our wonderful Dell with our service tag number. Service tags go back so far, but so handy. And I even looked this up, and this computer is still on the Dell website. And the fact that it is just amazing, considering 26 years later, they're keeping it in their database, especially with the mass amount of systems that they put out. I think that's just absolutely wonderful. So this here is showing our Windows 2000 Professional 1 to 2 CPU. So a good indicator that this is what came on this computer, Windows 2000. Okay, now that that's all done, let's pop this side off and see what we have inside. So all I did was push that button in the front, and it lifts up just kind of like a lever, and there we are. And just nothing but metal. Just look at that. And just, I mean, it's just like, it's, you know how you open a standard case up and you have all this room to kind of work around? Not this one. This is just, I almost feel like it's protection or something. Look at this massive power supply that we have, and it kind of gives you an indicator here how to open it up. Okay, so before I start digging into this, I'm just going to change the camera angle around so we can get a better look, or I should say a bird's eye view look at this computer. Okay, welcome back. We have the Dell on its side, and given the size of it, I'm not even zoomed in here at all. And you can see that it's taking up the entire frame, which is it's a massive computer. So here we are. We do have this massive power supply along the bottom of the system. And like I said, it adds quite a bit of weight to the computer, but this green handle, love Dell for in terms of user accessibility. It really tells you what you can interact with in these computers. So you just move it up like this. So it kind of just releases it. You can see on the hinging system that you can now release it. So I'm going to pull up on it and pull it out. And there we are. You can see that it just completely opens right up and out of the way, allowing us to have a better view of the inside of the computer itself. Now we're kind of exposed to this cross member that we have, and the cross member is doing a couple of things. Obviously, I think it adds strength to the system in some form. And also, it's holding the back end of what looks like the video card in, just kind of like slotted in there. But it looks like there's just a screw that I can remove. So I'm going to remove that screw just to see what we have kind of lurking underneath. Gives us a better view of what's going on for sure. Yeah, it just kind of slides in and comes out, and there we are. So you can see that this kind of device, this little kind of bracket here, holds the back end of this card in place, which is interesting. Now, I think there was a couple IBMs I have as well that do that, hold those cards in place. Okay, we have now just a better view of the motherboard. And so we do have a couple other things we can kind of comment on here as we go. I'm going to take off this kind of this tunnel area. It says Dell, just two little squeezes here, and we just take that right out. And there we are. And my goodness, look at those heat sinks. I mean, for two Pentium 3, looks like slot 1 interfaces, we do have two massive heat sinks that are here. And then you can, of course, see the CPUs. I'm just seeing if I can see the model information on the CPU itself. Usually you can see that. So it looks like it says 866/256. So I imagine that's the speed, the megahertz, and the looks like the cache as well. That's what I believe that is. So to remove these, obviously, the heat sinks obviously are holding things in place as well. So you unscrew those 4 pillars, and then you would remove those out of the slots using those 2 side clips if you wanted to gain access. It's screwed right to the motherboard. I mean, that's just pretty awesome. And then we also have an exhaust fan directly on the CPUs themselves. I just think that's a really great design. Okay, and along the back, where I would anticipate a traditional power supply would be, there's a little release button that opens up like so. And then sure enough, it exposes you what looks like to the memory of the board, as well as an additional, it looks like an ATX power connector on the motherboard. So I'm not sure if it is kind of like one of those setups where if you had an ATX power supply or a Dell version of the power supply, that you could actually plug it in and without this, or you could run dual. I'm not sure. Now, obviously this is removable from the system, but when it's closed, it blocks the back. Now, whether that's for blocking it because of dust or kind of saying, hey, there's already a power supply installed down below, don't be installing a secondary one. I have to look into that. But to me, I mean, power supplies generally in workstations or servers would have dual power supplies in case of a power failure or additional power is required. So keep me honest down in the comments and let me know if there'd ever be a case where you would have both PSUs populated in a system like this. But just look at the massive board that is in this system. I mean, you have the just the scale of it. It's hard to tell just by the way the video is, but I mean, just look at that. Look at the scale of it. I just think it's absolutely awesome. So up here, like I said, we have what looks like, I'll start from top to bottom. So it looks like we have an ATX power supply interface, or Dell proprietary, if you will. It looks like we have an audio cable going from the back of the optical drive to the board. You would see that quite often back in the day where you'd say have an expansion sound card where you plug that directly into where, you know, if the motherboard didn't have integrated audio, in this particular case it does, so it's plugged in there. I mean, over the time, obviously, that became obsolete. I did find our batteries, so our CMOS batteries in the top right-hand corner of the board over here. And it looks like to be a CR2032, which is amazing. Don't have to worry about any of that leakage stuff. Well, I mean, less likely because I have had those coin cells leak before. We have our standard floppy connector going to our floppy drive up top. We do have what looks like a, is this computer populated with a, No, okay. I was really hoping that this computer did come with a hard disk, and it does not. So the answer is we're not going to find out today if it has an operating system. Well, because it doesn't have a hard disk. But we do have what looks like a SCSI connector directly on the motherboard. So you can see the SCSI connector here, directly interfaced to the motherboard, which would make sense because I do see the Adaptec chipset down here. We do have integrated SCSI, external SCSI on the back of the system in our I/O area. And then on the motherboard itself, we do have that SCSI, which is absolutely awesome, especially if you wanted to run, say, a SCSI hard disk, for example, instead of running IDE. So we do have an IDE connector, that a ribbon cable that's going from the motherboard to the optical drive, but also, like I said, I'm pretty sure, I'm not pretty sure. I would think that this was just connected at the time based on the wiring that's kind of just laying around here, would have been connected to an IDE drive, or potentially maybe a rated system of some sort, but in this particular case, we don't have that. Okay, down below, it looks like, and maybe this is the answer to my question. So it looks like we do have a SCSI cable, also connected to the motherboard. So another SCSI interface, and it is plugged into a terminator. So it's very possible that that is what was truly connected in the system before. More likely is that we had a couple SCSI drives, or at least one SCSI drive that was connected to the system as a primary hard disk. I have literally a brand new sealed Maxtor 36 gigabyte SCSI interface drive that I've just been dying to test out. Like I said, I found this at Goodwill as well, or at a Goodwill. It was actually a Value Village up here in Canada, and it was just sitting there, and it's completely sealed. It's never been opened. And so this would be a perfect system to test this out in, to pop it into that ribbon cable with the terminator already on there, which is great. Now, I don't know if I need to terminate everything or if I just need to terminate that one end. Now, if I need to terminate everything, that obviously complicates things a little bit because I don't have terminators, and then that will change my direction. But again, keep me honest down in the comments and we will do that. But yeah, it'd be nice to test that out. And it looks like we have another IDE connector on the motherboard. Okay, continuing on, we do have what looks like our video card, and this is an AGP Pro slot based on the length of the card. Let's remove it out here, and that's what would keep it in place. Yeah, you can see it's AGP Pro because it has the extra connector there on the end, and it is an AGP card that is installed. Looks like it is a Matrox card. And let's get the model information. I'm not exactly sure the exact model of this card. It says 906-04 Revision B. A dedicated fan, which is, okay. That's good to know. This fan is quite dirty and looks like it's gummed up pretty well. So I'm going to have to see if I can take off the sticker and see if I can add some bearing oil and see if we can free that up a bit, because last thing we want to do is have this come up on us, especially for cooling. But yeah, no, we're going to definitely try it with this video card installed, especially having dual VGA. That's pretty neat. I definitely want to see if this computer posts, that's for sure. We'll do that today, just to be absolutely sure. Okay, there we are. I should be using some contact cleaner, especially if I'm going to go through all the work of putting this back together. So before we switch it around, I will do that. Just out of curiosity, we do have this network card. Network cards, aren't very fancy. Nothing to write home about by any means, just like our typical modems, but at least network cards are still useful. I'm going to pop this PCI card out. Yeah, we do have an Intel-based card. So we have, it says here, it's an S82557 chipset. I don't know the exact model of this, but I didn't know it was an Intel originally, but someone had indicated this in a previous video where another Dell I was working in had two of these side by side. So they definitely were working on dual NIC, but that is what is installed in this computer. So I'm just going to pop it back in just because it was originally installed until we do some sort of restoration on this computer. So generally in commercial systems or workstations, you have decent hardware that they really came with it, because the cost of the hardware just day one was pretty expensive. Okay, so we have these two in here. So calling out the fact we have an AGP Pro interface, we have 4 PCI, and then we have what looks like a PCI as well as the expansion here. And generally on Dells, and Compacts came with these as well, is that these were a custom audio card that you could get for these systems. So having that expansion there as well for that ability. and a couple different interfaces on the bottom of the motherboard. I'm not exactly sure what they are at 100%, but I have to look into that. We have an Intel chipset on the motherboard itself, and we have 3-COM as well. So 3-COM is probably running the integrated NIC. So we have a 3-COM chipset, Intel chipset, Adaptec chipset. We have a chipset party on this Dell motherboard. I'm really curious to see if we can get that SCSI working. If not, if it requires additional or different cable or additional terminators, I'd have to look into that. We do have our power supply connected along the bottom with our 2 connectors. Again, you can see that they're definitely proprietary to Dell. Okay, so I'm going to get everything kind of put back together now. I like how everything just folds back. It's pretty straightforward to work on. So I'm going to get this put back together, get this all screwed back in, put the power supply back in place, and flip this around, get a different camera angle, and see if we can get this computer posting. Okay, welcome back, and this is not the site that I thought you would expect to see, as normally my videos go. So I was in the process of getting this all set up on the bench, and everything looked good. And, you know, I don't have a way to test this power supply with a typical power supply tester. And quite frankly, like I said, these systems come to me in an e-waste fashion. So I wasn't really too worried about it. You know, most of the systems, I'd say 99% of the systems that I get, I plug in, they just work. At least the power supplies work. I've only had 1 or 2 Dells, actually, to be honest with you, that the power supplies had an issue. So as soon as I plugged this system in to power, I didn't even get a chance to push anything, do anything. I heard this big pop, like it was loud. And so I'm going, all right, well, that didn't sound good. So immediately unplugged it from mains power and right from the power strip. And I said, okay, I'm going to take apart the power supply and take a look to see if there's anything in here that would indicate that there is a problem. And to be honest with you, I am not seeing anything in this power supply that is anything that would look blown, and I do not smell anything either. So again, for something that I would have gotten like a big pop noise out of it, like it was a very audible pop, I don't see anything in here. Like I'm looking at the capacitors, I'm looking at the coils, I'm looking at all the different components in here, and I'm not seeing anything that, you know, it looks bad. You know, I don't see anything. I do see this white gunk in here. I think that's just, you know, some silicone or something to hold things in place, especially this big cap. They are Nichicon caps by the looks of things as well, which is a really good brand. But again, I'm not seeing anything that is visible to me that would indicate that there's an issue with this power supply. And I'm showing everybody on cam because, you know, there might be something on here that you might say in the comments, like, did you check this? Did you check that? And I'm going to do some testing after the fact. I don't have another power supply like this, I don't think, not on hand. And I don't have a ton of experience with power supplies, know enough to be dangerous, but you know, that can also get you in trouble. So I'm going to reach out to some friends of mine that can help me diagnose this particular power supply. But you know, as soon as I plugged it in, like within a second, there was that loud pop. But I expected to, you know, see something. But outside of seeing something, like the other Dell I had, I could smell something. And unfortunately, I'm not seeing anything or smelling anything out of this power supply. There's nothing indicating like magical smoke or, you know, anything that, you know, that would indicate there'd be a problem. That's why it's just blowing my mind. And then so I looked inside the actual system itself, like the motherboard, because sometimes a bad power supply can actually blow a component on the motherboard, whether it's a capacitor or something else. And sometimes, as I learned from a friend of mine, it could be something in the computer that's preventing the power supply from functioning correctly. So I did check that. I actually disconnected it from the power supply from the motherboard and tried plugging it in, and there's no activity on the fans that you'd normally expect to power up. I plugged something into the Molex connector, like an old hard drive, same thing. I put a load on it and it didn't make any difference. Yeah, so here we are. This is not where I expected to be in this video. And you know, this is definitely out of scope of what I wanted to do today. At the very least, I was going to see if the system would power up and give us at least some sort of post. And unfortunately, we're not at that stage. And I was hoping to get this posting so that I could at least get to a point where we can install a SCSI hard disk, look at installing an operating system, seeing what is installed in the system in terms of components, and go from there. So I think in the next video, in system pertaining to this system, it's going to be doing some diagnostic on this power supply, really trying to determine if we can get this system at least working or at least posting. For now, we're going to leave on a cliffhanger. I hate to do that to everybody, but not everything goes right in these videos. But again, this is all part and parcel of dealing with retro technology or older technology. But I really want to see this Dell up and running. I love the components that are on the motherboard, the dual slot one, the multitude of connections within the system itself, like the actual motherboard plus the I/O, and then having that SCSI capability built directly into the motherboard, integrated, whether it's the external or the internal, and getting that drive connected and seeing what we can do with this computer. We're definitely going to have to dig into this further into a second part of this series and get this beautiful Dell workstation up and running. That said, if you liked today's video, please give it a thumbs up. If you haven't already, please hit that subscribe button. Makes a world difference, helps this channel grow, tells YouTube you like what you're seeing, helps promote the channel. Hit the notification button, change it to all. You'll be notified of new content such as this. Please leave a comment down below. Are you familiar with these particular systems? Did you ever own one or work with one in the past? Or based on what you see in the video, is there anything that you saw on the components or in the components or something that you recommend I should be testing? I really want to hear the comments. I love the community interaction. I respond to absolutely every comment. Always making new content. We'll see you in the next video. Bye-bye.